Now let's talk about email contexts. This animation is applicable to both creating a new email template or adding a new email context to an existing template. To create a new email template, there are two ways that you can do it. The first is to use the New menu and select the email template, or use the welcome screen, click Create Template, and then Email. This screen appears in both of these options. Now, the things you have to set up here are just the initial setup. In reality, you can overwrite all of these things inside of your template once it's created. But if you want just a static subject and to select one of the layouts, or to use a different layout, then you can do that directly here. So this is how the default email template looks. Now you can change all of the contents here. So let's say you want to add a message at the top or the bottom to replace the small lorem ipsum, or you want to add your images and everything. All of this is modifiable. Now, an email is different from a print output in the sense that whatever the amount of content that you have inside of the email, it will never have a page break. It'll just appear as one long email. Even if you have pages and pages of text, the only thing that the person that receives the email will have to do to view it is to scroll down and they'll see the whole contents. This is why when you only have an email context, you don't have the concept of medias or master pages or page sizes or any of that. Now, the properties of an email section are actually pretty simple. There are only two options: the properties themselves, which is just the name of the section, which has no effect on the output, and the static subject, which we can override with a script. The other option is the includes, and this defines what style sheets will be included inside the email when you send it. We've already seen how the cascading style sheets work inside of the style sheet animation, but basically any style that you have in default.css or the global style sheet can be overwritten in the HTML context style sheet. Now, one note about styles inside of emails. When you send an email, all of the styles will be merged inside of the actual template, so inside of the contents. The reason for this is that emails don't support external resources like style sheets and JavaScripts and images, so everything is embedded directly into it. Now, I've opened a prettier, well-made template here just to show you what it can look like with actual data, as well as the header and footer modified. Now, one thing that you may have noticed in the workspace is that at the top, there is a gray bar that indicates where the email will be sent and what the subject of the email will be. As I mentioned, you can override the subject and the email recipient using simple scripts. Now, the data has to come from your record. So here I have the record that has the email field. So when I double click on the to script, which is automatically added when you create an email template or a new email context, you can select which field inside of your record contains the email address where that specific record or the email generated from that record will be sent. The other script, the subject script, needs to be added using the new email subject. Now, I already have it inside of my template, so let me just double click on it just to show you what it contains. So here what we have is an invoice number as a prefix, and then the field invoice ID. So when the client receives the email, it says something like what we see in the workspace, invoice number, INV, blah, blah, blah. Now you can, of course, create a whole message here, so just adding the prefix and suffix in multiple fields, just like you would in any of the other script wizards. Now, I do have a warning to give you in regards to email output. The fact of the matter is you may not know what email client the person is going to use. So you have to be very specific in the way that you build your email template if you're adding new stuff to it. An example of this is that positioned boxes are completely unsupported in 90% of email clients. You can't have an absolute position box. So even if you add one, you add a logo, most clients will simply ignore it. It just won't appear. Now, there are many small considerations when creating emails. There's a resource next to this video that'll point you to some of these resources where you can learn how to make them yourselves. Now, before you actually send these emails, there's one thing that you need to set up initially. In the Preferences dialog, there's a section on email. The general section indicates where the email will be sent from. So you put in, say, either the company name or your name, and then an email address that will show in the From field when the person receives the email. The other thing you need to set up is the SMTP settings. This is the outgoing email server through which emails are going to be sent. Now, this is generally given to you by IT, and you have two different options that you'll really use normally. The first one is the production. So the one that you want to use when you're actually sending, let's say, your 10,000 email batch. And you have the option to use a specific username or password if the outgoing server requires it, which is generally not the case. And there's a test host. And if you want to use a different one, for example, an internal dev server for the email that doesn't actually send them, you can specify that too. The last one is Mandrill app. We won't be touching that. There will be a specific animation on this service. So once you've set up your SMTP information, it's time to actually try to send emails. Now you have two different ways of sending emails. The first one you want to try is to send a test email. So here it will automatically reproduce the settings that you have in the preferences, such as the name and email address for the from, and you have a to email. What this does basically, this dialog, is that all of the records that you specify inside of the records section will be sent as a test email to the email address or addresses set in the to box. Now, this is a great way of testing whether or not the email looks right in whatever email client you're using. Another thing that's interesting here is the attachments section, and this appears also when you're sending the real email. You have the option of attaching a print context as a PDF attachment or the web context as an HTML page. Now, this of course only works if you have these contexts inside of your template. But for example, you could have an email that has a summary of an invoice. So instead of having the whole details table here with all of the detail item, you could just have the total, the grand total, and then say, click the attached PDF to view your invoice. And then the print context itself has all of the actual details, and it's a legal document that you can print out. And this is attached as a PDF using the default PDF settings. As for the web context, when you attach it, all of the resources are embedded. So if the client has the email, even if he's offline, when he clicks on the web context, any browser will be able to display the web context as it was created and fully functional. And finally, when you send the real email, you have basically the same options, except you don't have the to. So this will send the real emails to the actual email addresses inside of your records. So if you click on all records and you hit send, it will send whatever number of records you have as emails. Now, one last detail, all of the preferences, the addresses, and the SMTP servers that you set here, if you're using automation and sending emails through the workflow tool, will be overwritten. So whatever options you set here in the PlanetPress workflow, the options that you set there will take priority.